Welcome to Session 3 of our Cyber Masterclass series presented by MCPc and McDonald Hopkins.
The Cyber Masterclass is a 5-part in-depth webinar event that examines the cybersecurity landscape from multiple points of view and culminates with the anatomy of a data breach.
Featured panelists in the field of cybersecurity law, technology, risk management, and communications from MCPc, McDonald Hopkins, Dixon Eaton, and Oswald companies will share their expertise along with professionals from the FBI, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, an independent arm of the Department of Homeland Security, and other distinguished guests. The series will take a holistic approach in examining the clear and present danger of cyber threats,
legal and cyber risk imperatives,
how your technology partner drives data protection,
and incident response planning,
all leading up to a fascinating finale, the anatomy of a data breach, which will include a live interactive simulation showing how all of these topics come together.
Because all of these sessions are interactive, we encourage you to share your questions by emailing us at events@mcdonaldhopkins.com and look for links to breakout sessions where you will be able to speak directly with presenters about topics specific to your organization or industry.
Session 3. How your technology partner drives data protection begins now. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for being here today for Session 3 of our Cyber Masterclass series, How Your Technology Partner Drives Data Protection. It's really a privilege to be here again with you today for this session. We have a really interesting and thoughtful discussion today, which will be led by Chris Pruitt. I'll talk about Chris in a second, and ironically enough, we were going to have our CISO, Ronnie Munn, on with us today. But he's actually handling 2 incident response for 2 of our clients and won't be able to join us during the presentation, but hopefully will be able to join us during the Q&A. And so leading today's discussion is Christopher Pruitt. Chris is a security principal here at MCPc. He's responsible for helping client organizations help develop their global risk cybersecurity programs who work to reduce and manage risk in areas of security, privacy, compliance, and disaster recovery. He has over 20 years of experience in IT security, working in a variety of industry verticals. He's been a CISO in multiple Fortune 500, 1,000 types of roles and owns and maintains several technical certifications. We're really fortunate to have a security practitioner of Chris's caliber with us today who has that unique ability to speak to people in the weeds at the technical level, all the way through the board of directors fluently at every level. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Pruitt, Security Principal at MCPc. Chris, over to you.
Glad to be here. It's a privilege and honor to be able to talk to people about security. We often work with people who are looking to improve their security, improve their programs, and always glad to be a part of those conversations. There are in the world of IT security, there's a 5-phased approach to the program itself. And this is really kind of born from NIST, the National Institute Standards and Technology Group, planning, prevention, detection, and response and recovery. So we see often that a lot of people are trying to spend a lot of their time and effort in prevention and detection, primarily prevention. So firewalls, antivirus, endpoint technology. What are the things that allow me to play defense? And really, that's in prevention. On the planning side, it's security is often late to the game. It's the 11th hour. Oh, what about security? Have we tested this? Have we put this thing in properly? Detection, we'll find in organizations that maybe are a little bit more mature, trying to identify nefarious things that are going on within their systems. There's a lot of technology around detection, but detection itself is not a technical function. It really requires people, process, and technology to execute well. You need technology to filter down the amount of issues that you have. You need people to be able to respond to the alerts that show up from detection, and they need processes by which they can execute to remediate the risk. We also see a lot of organizations that are ill prepared when it comes to response. They may be able to firefights. There's some issue and they put a lot of smart people in a room and are able to figure it out. But response in a kind of informal, unprepared manner can be very costly. We'll see companies often that have some kind of security incident, and if they are unprepared, it's usually an 8-day outage. If they are well prepared, it's likely to be 2 or 3 days. So there is a quantifiable impact to not being prepared. And on the recovery side, a lot of organizations are backing up their systems. Business management often thinks, oh, IT's got everything backed up. Well, how long does it take to recover everything? Is that a five days, 2 days, 8 hours? How much data is lost? Are you backing up once a week, once a day, every 4 hours? What's that delta of data that you're going to lose that's going to set your business back? All of that data that has to be re-entered, recalculated, and put into those applications.
And so, Chris, in looking at this slide, would it be safe to say that the more time and energy and resources that you dedicate into, your first vertical there in planning really positively impact 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Absolutely. And this is no different from the execution of a business plan or business strategy. You don't just show up at work one day on the business side of things and, hey, we're going to go make this new widget starting tomorrow. There's a lot of planning. Where are we going to get the raw materials? Where are we going to source this from? Where are we going to get the labor hours to build the widget? Are we going to staff it ourselves? Are we going to use staff augmentation? Is this product going to be profitable? Have we analyzed it? So it's preparing, planning is valuable in any line of business. Again, we often see in IT and IT security that, the focus is just around playing defense. So cyber attacks continue to become more and more expensive. A lot of that is due to ransomware, but the real impact of businesses is around availability. Imagine you're a healthcare organization and you lost half of your data center due to a ransomware event or a malware outage. You no longer have access to your electronic medical records system, your EMR. How does your business continue to operate? How do you triage patients? How do you bill? All of these critical business functions are impacted. In the manufacturing sector, you may have a lot of your labor force standing around. You may have people coming into the office who are getting paid by your company, but they have no work to do because they don't have access to their systems and data and everything else. So it's a lot of people standing around, no revenue coming in. Meanwhile, your expenses continue to escalate. Additional impacts to supplier networks, customers, PR, and a lot of other things that are dealt with. And certainly the cost of response and recovery can be significant as well. Most IT organizations are pretty lean and may not have all the hands that they need. So they have to bring on experts, incident responders that are not cheap, additional costs in legal, PR crisis communication, and other things. On top of that, ransom. There have been a lot of ransomware payments made, some very large ones, Garmin and some others in the marketplace. And this continues to be a drag and burden on the economy.
So Chris, on the previous slide, you documented some of the costs that impacted, from a data breach. And I think it's really fascinating that it's not just a ransomware, payout, but really it's financial costs that impact almost every aspect of an organization. And so this slide, I think, is fascinating for our those on the call. When you really want to try and document what does a data breach cost compared to the, again, back to the planning of spending money up front to try and prevent a data breach.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there is good ROI in security. And, I think we've seen that over the last couple of years, this increase in spending, but an increase in impact of not being secure. And one thing that I think I want everybody to notice on this screen: business loss, vendor partners, notification mailings, legal and litigation, credit monitoring. What does a cyber attack cost? None of these things are IT related. That's what you need to understand. IT security is not an IT issue. This isn't something that the business management and business teams can kind of wave their hands and say, well, IT's got it, because the impact really is large. It's significant, and it directly affects business. I've seen this. I've performed quite a few security incidents for client organizations, being down for 5 days, 8 days, having systems that were unrecoverable, paying large ransoms because they did not have insurance, or maybe they had some other issue where the insurance company did not cover it. How much is in your treasury? Are you prepared for these types of things? Can you mitigate or offset that cost? But it is business affecting, and it really is risk management when it comes to managing IT risk. But really, from a management perspective, business management perspective, asking your IT organization to be prepared and have a plan is critical. It needs to be done. It's the cost of doing business. It's high impact and low cost from an investment perspective to ensure that you have a plan and that you're going to be prepared for in the event that you have some kind of security incident.
Great, thank you.
The first couple of presentations that we'd given through the Cyber Masterclass were around legal and risk, and really beyond that, what needs to be done for planning: people, process, and technology. It really takes an orchestration of all three of these. I've often been asked over the course of my career, what's the technology I can buy to make this thing go away? And there is no silver bullet. You can have great technology, but if it's not configured properly, you're going to have issues. If you don't have the people who can identify and configure the technology correctly and identify that something bad is going on, you're going to have issues. And if those people don't have good sound processes to deal with, then all of it's pretty much a wash. You can have a great email filtering technology, but if someone bypasses it and because of poor passwords, business email compromise, how is your organization prepared to handle such a thing? Do your people have the processes? Do your IT security people have the processes by which they can reduce the impact or alleviate the or remediate the threat? I've been in IT for about 25 years and in IT security for the bulk of my career, working in a variety of roles. And one thing that I've noticed at most organizations, IT does not understand business risk, and business people do not understand IT risk. And because of that, there's this great divide. Business people put their head in the sand and they think IT's got everything under control. I'm sure they're backing things up. I'm sure they've got plans. I'm sure they're testing things. I'm sure we've got good defensive technology. And on the other side, IT really doesn't understand what are the critical business systems. How we, in the event of a recovery exercise, how do we prioritize the recovery to get our business back up as soon as we can? Where is the important data? How are we protecting it? But IT often doesn't have this knowledge. So they're trying to protect everything the same, and it's not really aligned to the business risk. On the planning side of things, these two questions are again kind of broken up, one for IT and one for business. What data is essential to the organization? That's a great question for IT to be able to answer. Do they know this? What are the critical applications that are required for the business to stay up and active, to build product, ship, invoice, collect cash, the standard business functions? What systems are required to do those business processes. IT often doesn't know that. They may not know where data is or where critical data resides or what departments need access to what, because they are not the creators of data. They are merely they're not the curators. They are kind of custodians. So they hold data. They have data in the systems that they keep upright and available, and trying to make them better, faster, quicker, provide more value, so better business decisions can be made. And on the other side of the coin, how certain are you that your data is protected? If you ask most business management people, boards of directors, senior management, they think IT's got everything under control, but it is a qualitative answer. Oh yeah, I'm sure IT's doing a good job. I'm sure they're encrypting data because we're required to. I'm sure they're backing it up, in the cloud or on tape or wherever. I'm sure they're running tests on recoveries. Again, this certainty is really born out of, we think we've got good qualified people, but where's the hard evidence? Being able to ask and answer, when was the last recovery exercise? How long did it take? How long do we expect if we had a complete outage, would it take for us to recover? And does that align with the business? If you've seen or played football, you've probably heard the best defense is a good offense. And in cybersecurity, the best defense is defense in depth. And we're going to get into security technology on the prevention side. So what we're seeing on the prevention side, a lot of organizations have firewalls, have antivirus, and think they're okay. But more and more attackers have been able to bypass these basic fundamental technologies that all organizations have fairly easily. And what happens when that wide receiver gets behind your safety? How are you going to respond? How can you recover? And those are really the areas of focus that companies aren't ready for. They get a bunch of smart people in a room and they try and fight that fire when it occurs. From a breach timeline, I think this will be of interest to a lot of people. A lot has talked about, how long have attackers been inside organizations? Well, really, it takes minutes to compromise a host. So a phishing email hits someone. Most people answer email within 2 to 6 minutes of that email hitting their inbox. They open a document, and that document contains some code that executes, taking advantage or exploiting a vulnerability in that system. At that point, the system is compromised. And then the access occurs where an attacker can access that system and could begin to exfiltrate data within minutes. And that data just may be system-related data. Who is this? What company? What passwords are there on their endpoint system? Maybe Word documents, Excel documents, anything that might be on that particular host that may be of interest. Attackers are often trying to monetize whatever they can. This may be data, this may be access. Discovery, interestingly, takes months. A lot of security technology, is getting updated often, but it may take a researcher or some compromised organization to identify some threat, and then that gets fed into threat intelligence and kind of makes its way out through the security community. And months later, the attacker is identified to be in your organization, maybe by the types of tools they have or some other way. Containment. So once an organization gets broken into, once you've identified that the attacker is in there, it does take days. Typically, organizations are unprepared in how to investigate. So they will pull in people from the outside, forensic investigators, incident responders, who look to see where are the bad guys? What do they have? What accounts do they have? How are they accessing the networks and systems that are there? From there, they build a plan on being able to shut all of that down, kick the bad guys out, and turn monitoring on to effectively ensure that the bad guys are out. This process isn't something that happens overnight. While many organizations are running a lot of the same infrastructure, Microsoft, Active Directory, Windows workstations, Windows servers, Cisco networks, and the like, Everybody runs them a little bit differently, but most importantly, attackers are using different techniques and procedures to be able to maintain connectivity into environment. Defense in depth is something that's talked about in security, and one, why is it needed? Well, if you have a single line of defense and it gets broken, you're going to be in trouble. Over time, a lot of security technologies have really been built up, and I think this slide is a great example, kind of showing the different layers of security technology. The two that we've highlighted, again, firewall and antivirus. Antivirus being content security. It's looking at files themselves for certain characteristics. But this is not data loss prevention. This isn't anything around web applications. This doesn't do much in the way of protecting phone systems, wireless systems, networks, and others. Most people have email filtering in some capacity, but unlikely to have intrusion prevention systems, honeypots, or all of this other security technology. And again, security technology in and of itself is not a silver bullet. But being able to layer some of these security technologies together, kind of linking them together, can provide a much better defense. And we'll get into some attacks and show you the value of having different layers of defense. On the threat intelligence side, and Gunnar, this is right up your alley. A lot of security technology are utilizing things on the bottom, IP addresses and hash values. Well, let me try and paint this picture a little bit. So attackers often have infrastructure that they are using. A lot of the ways and the tools that they're using, they're not going to change out because it's expensive for them to change the tools. But if I could attack from a small business in the middle of Pennsylvania, if I can attack a Fortune 500 and make it look like it was coming from that company, or as an attacker, I could spin up a tenant in Azure and make it look like the attack was coming from there. Being able to have this highly disposable, highly replaceable infrastructure is what attackers are doing. So the value of IP addresses and hashes inside security technologies is relatively low. There are new IP addresses, new hash values on a daily basis. A lot of security technology are trying to utilize those. But as organizations mature, really looking into tactics, techniques, procedures, TTPs of attackers is really where the focus needs to be. If you think this slide is overwhelming, it is meant to be. I had mentioned earlier, security is wide, it's deep, and a lot of organizations look at, we have a firewall, we have antivirus, we're okay. Well, security is a lot more than that. And in IT security, how are you educating your workforce? On the risk assessment side, are you performing annual risk assessments, penetration tests, vulnerability scans to really test and understand your level of maturity and capability within the organization? Governance, do you have any laws, regulations, compliance requirements that you have to meet? Do you have customers and suppliers who are asking from you, are you NIST compliant? Are you aligned with ISO 27001? How are you measuring your program internally and externally to your suppliers and others? In IT operations, it's critically important. In the event that someone calls and, hey, I clicked on something, are you prepared? What are you going to do? Do you have the ability to detect and alert on issues? When an incident occurs, not if, but when, are you prepared? Do you have partners in PR crisis communication? Do you have forensic investigative capabilities inside your organization? Unlikely, but do you have partners that you can call to do these types of things? Access control being more and more important. People come and go from a company. Is IT terminating accounts? How are they onboarding new ones? How are they granting access to critical pieces of information or applications within your environment? Again, IT security and the handling of risk within IT is an incredibly complex thing that a lot of people take for granted, thinking, we're okay, we don't need to worry about it. On the assessment side of things, a lot of organizations that we work with want to know, or maybe they've heard, we need a penetration test, or I want a security assessment. What does that really mean? So I'm going to get into and try and provide a little clarity on assessments. First, on the governance side of things, there are really three types of assessments that I typically see or am asked for by customers. Framework assessments are fairly binary. So you as an organization, you may come to a company like us and say, we want a framework assessment aligned to NIST. Well, framework assessments are binary, and it's here a list of 140 controls. Do you have this or don't you? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And at the end of that, here you go, and it's really a list of controls and your answers regurgitated back to you. There may be some narrative, some roadmap in there on, here are some things that we would suggest, but it really doesn't give you a flavor for your maturity. And that's where a maturity assessment comes in. Maturity assessments aren't just binary. They really are measuring the maturity of a control or process within your organization. A framework assessment might ask, do you patch your workstations and servers? Yes, we do. But a maturity assessment will say, well, are you doing them consistently everywhere within your organization? Do you have documented timelines and requirements for when you're going to do these things? Are you measuring the success of your patching program? And in the event that you're not patching well, do you have any corrective mechanisms to improve what you're doing to ensure that it's a successful process in mitigating risk in your organization? And finally, risk assessments are more business aligned. So rather than just here are a list of controls and looking at them just in kind of that state, we want to know a little bit more about your business. So what industry are you in? What kind of data do you have? Are your things in the cloud? Are they on premise? What types of adversaries could there be? How are you protecting information? And really looking at those controls, but looking to align them from a risk perspective, a risk assessment perspective to your business, which is important. Some controls are going to have more value than others, and it's important to have that background on what's important to the business and what's not. On the technical side of things, a lot of different kind of tests. A lot of companies will come to us and ask for penetration tests, but may not understand the value or the expected outcome of those. And a penetration test is really a test, a technical assessment on your defenses and potentially your alerting and monitoring mechanisms within your organization. So a penetration test acts like an attacker trying to break into your network, either from the outside and or from the inside. So they can both be internal or external. Vulnerability assessments are a scan of your network, again, both internal and or external, to identify how well you are patching and removing risk or vulnerabilities from your environment. Cloud assessments are a little bit different. You can't necessarily penetration test Microsoft Office 365, but what organizations like our own perform are assessments where we look at the configuration, the bells, the whistles, the levers, the buttons, to see how well things are configured. Do you have multi-factor authentication? Have you turned off legacy authentication? What are the types of things that you're doing inside those environments to protect data? Are you encrypting data within those environments? Do you have data loss prevention capabilities turned on? We're often asked, how do I know if my company is doing the right things? And what we've tried to do is create a quick scorecard to really understand how mature you are from some areas that are fairly critical from what we're seeing. Does your organization encrypt sensitive data? Why is this important? Well, a lot of privacy laws, privacy regulations, GDPR, CCPA, and how are you protecting this data from prying eyes? And that's where this is. And Encryption occurs both in transit, when you transfer from system to system, or data at rest. How are you trying to protect this data while it's sitting within servers or within systems? Does your organization deploy patches? Patches are bug fixes that occur usually monthly from companies like Microsoft and Adobe and others that remediate bugs or vulnerabilities. Many of these have security criticalities where it can allow an attacker to come in and break into a system fairly easily. So it's incredibly important to patch and maintain systems in your environment. This is no different than owning a car. You buy a car, you've got to rotate tires, change brakes, get oil changes. IT infrastructure and IT systems also need care and feeding over the course of their life. Does IT deploy a consistent, secure environment? So consistency is incredibly important to security. If I'm trying to protect things and everything looks a little bit different, it makes my job incredibly difficult. So ensuring that we've got a good configuration and that we've deployed it consistently in our environment gives me a good feeling. So I know that, if some new risk pops up, that I in a cookie cutter, consistent fashion can remediate it through my environment. Over the course of the last couple of years, ransomware has become incredibly important. Are you backing up all of your systems? And most importantly, in my opinion, testing recovery processes. Plenty of organizations may do some small test restores, but in the event that you have a large scale outage, half of your environment, your full environment gets wiped out, how fast can you recover? Is that 5 days, 3 days, 8 hours, 4 hours, or don't you know? There was a large ransomware event a couple of years ago. A company's Active Directory was ransomed. And the company did not have adequate backups, correct backups of Active Directory, and they never tested restores. Well, they had to rebuild Active Directory from the ground up. And these are the types of impacts, that slows the ability for the business to get back to doing business things. Our backups stored offline. We've seen plenty of ransomware security incidents where backups were also encrypted and there was no recourse other than to pay for the ransom and get the recovery key and hope that you were able to recover all of your data. But that process, that ransom, that decryption process is also something that takes many, many days. This isn't something that at the snap of a finger, you pay $500,000 and it goes away. A lot of work still needs to occur to decrypt data. Two-factor authentication, incredibly important, especially on internet-facing or internet-accessible applications, Office 365, VPN, other things. Defending endpoints and servers. Antivirus is dead. Legacy antivirus cannot protect systems anymore. And if you have not invested in what's called EPP or EDR, endpoint protection platforms, or endpoint detection and response, you need to. Security often can be a difficult thing to measure, but measurement's incredibly important. I'll talk to business leaders, and that they will. I'll ask them a couple of questions. How they're doing in IT security. Oh, we're doing a good job. How do you know? Where are you at with it, and are you measuring it against any particular framework? And all of the ones listed here are really the yardsticks by which we measure security programs, either in what controls are effectively installed, or from a maturity perspective, as I talk through the maturity assessment. Many frameworks are aligned to particular industries. Some are aligned to particular sized organizations. Manufacturers love ISO because of ISO 9001. And many multinationals will also use ISO. It's more of an international standard, where NIST is a US government standard and is a little more technical in nature. I think ISO has a little bit more business friendly language in it. COBIT, which I do not see used much, is more audit focused. NERC in the energy sector, high trust in HIPAA in healthcare. And I would say many organizations that are either just kind of building a security program, or kind of mid-market on down focus, and usually utilize the CIS Center for Internet Security top 20 controls. It's a good place to start. to be able to measure what are you doing from a security perspective. So what you see in front of you is NIST cybersecurity framework. We'd mentioned early on planning, prevention, detection, response, recovery. Very important. How are you going to protect and respond if you don't know what types of assets you have? How are you governing security? Security itself isn't just firewalls and antivirus, but really risk management. How are you as a business managing that in your organization? Prevention, access controls, least privilege. Do you have the right people accessing the right types of data in your system, or is it more of a free-for-all? And in the event that it's a free-for-all, keep in mind any one of those people could get breached through phishing and be able to give up all of the keys to the kingdom. That's essentially what happens to a lot of companies that do a poor job of access control. Access control also is terminating accounts when people leave. We often see organizations where HR may not trust IT very well. And because of that, there's all these orphaned accounts of people who used to work there 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and they still have passwords and the accounts are still active and work. Certainly protective technology and detection. More mature organizations have kind of moved from just defense to detection, being able to identify when bad things are going on. There's constantly attacks going on. Firewalls are constantly playing defense. But when one of your systems sees something odd, is that going to bubble up to someone's attention or not? And do they have the capabilities to be able to investigate that and do something about it? And this is really where response comes in. Are you prepared for a response? If you have a business email compromise, does your staff know what to do? What accounts are they going to disable? Can they do it quickly? Or is the attacker going to get inside your system, spam more people, steal more credentials while they're trying to figure out what's going on? Being able to have kind of blueprints for how to deal with these things is incredibly helpful. And of course, recovery. Recovery, not just being able to do disaster recovery, but in the event that you have a penetration test or you identify some threats in your environment, what is your remediation? How do you go about fixing these and improving security within your environment? And of course, communications. Security is not just an IT issue, but being able to talk to business people about the risks, being able to communicate to end users their part and their responsibility in the culture of prevention and detection is incredibly important.
Chris, two things come to mind on this screen and the previous screen is the challenges to many companies are going to have to deal with multiple frameworks or compliance or regulatory issues. And then two, what can someone expect to see when they get their score back from a cybersecurity framework, type of assessment, and not be afraid of those results, because there's probably going to be some red areas in there, or some really low performing areas.
Yeah, I think just understanding where you're at is power. There's a lot of value in understanding where you're at, because from there you should be able to build a road to recovery, a road for improvement. Without that, you're kind of in a blurry, murky forest, not really sure what's going on, not sure which way is north. And it's a little more difficult to put together a sound strategy, and you may be shooting from the hip. Oh, let's go buy this technology. Let's implement that. Let's hire some analysts. No real strategy. We're just going to throw a bunch of stuff at a wall and hope that it makes this problem go away. The value of an assessment should be providing that roadmap for you. And I've seen things all over the place. Most organizations, I would say, are highly surprised where they end up on that first assessment. Oh, I thought we were doing a much better job. And it's because IT is lean. They're more focused on keeping systems upright and available rather than secure. And again, pushed by the business to create value and not necessarily worrying about response and recovery. Measuring is incredibly important. I can't tell you over the course of my career how valuable understanding this has really been to me. A lot of IT people will, measure things again in a binary fashion. Things are either up or they're down. They can't necessarily tell you, are things improving and to what degree? So being able to measure, use those yardsticks, use those frameworks to be able to measure where you're at today, whether that's 2 out of 5, 2.2 out of 5, or whatever. You can identify some strengths, identify some areas of weaknesses. And we saw earlier, security is wide, it's deep, it's complex. You cannot fix everything at once. You cannot fix everything inside one calendar year. It takes time and effort, but being able to focus in a few key areas is incredibly important and powerful. But if you don't know what those areas are and you continue to try and boil the ocean, year over year, you're going to get the same kind of results that you've gotten thus far. So we've talked, plenty about planning. On the prevention detection side, what are the important things that we have talked about? Patching, backups, access and asset management. I think are done poorly in many organizations. We see a lot of organizations, larger organizations right now, trying to get those two right, building programs around access management, identity and access management, and asset management. Matching technology with people and process. It can't be any one, it's really got to be all three. On the response side of things, incident response, it might be digital forensics isn't going to be something that likely you're going to want to create a skill set in your organization because it's not utilized much. But do you have a partner? Do you have some basic capabilities on handling chain of custody? If you had some insider threat issue, does IT know how to handle that evidence, be able to put it in a bag or do something with it until someone can get there who has the background to be able to forensically analyze it? Incident response, just having a plan and policy goes a long way, as does testing it. Similarly to disaster recovery exercises, recovering systems, you should hold tabletop exercises around incident response, getting the group together to talk through a fake incident to see, do we have all of our ducks in a row? Are the right people at this table together? Are we missing anyone? Are there things that we didn't think about before? Certainly having a choreography with legal and risk, being able to coordinate and work with them, both risk management and legal, should be interested in help influence IT security within the IT stack and certainly within the company. And on the recovery side, recovery isn't just, can we restore data, on our servers? It really is about the speed, the efficacy, how well we do this. What is the recovery time objective, recovery point objective that we're trying to get to? Have we tested those things? And certainly remediation, we have issues. How do we fix these things in the environment? For response, see, measure, and improve. Having an incident response team, so that this is a team kind of dedicated to the function, not something that you're just going to throw a bunch of people in a room, but these are dedicated people, technical and non-technical. You may have database administrators, network engineers, IT security people, legal, HR, finance, that all play a critical role. Marketing, PR, crisis communication, all play a critical role handling an incident within a company. Not all incidents need to be scaled up to that team, but those team members need to understand that when called on, they have an important key function. IT are notoriously bad communicators. Who's handling communication within the technical folks? Who is communicating that up to senior management? Who within senior management is telling the board of directors? Who's handling communication outside of the company? All things that IT isn't going to do. Again, IT security is a business issue. It is not an IT issue. Incident response plan, policy, processes, all important to be able to have in place. And of course, those rely on the defense detection and response technologies that you have within your organization. So these are all critical features. Now on the measuring side, being able to measure and improve what you're doing, do you have a measurement from alarm to triage or from time to close an incident? We have this issue, someone emailed in, does it take your team 3 days to investigate and close business email compromise? That's a lot of time for an attacker to get around, poke around, do other things, steal data. Or do they have their processes refined and are able to kind of pivot and focus on these things and get them done in a short period of time? To me, the most meaningful measure is mean time to remediation. So it's not just time to close a security incident, but MTTR, mean time to remediation. In the event that something happens, is it 3 days? Is it 8 hours? Is it 2 hours? Being able to look at these processes and squeeze them down over time to reduce risk in the organization, reduce time to spread is incredibly important. Improving speed to remediation, important. I've worked with and seen many organizations that they'll get a penetration test. It'll be 120 pages long of bad things, and they need to go fix these. And guess what? They may fix 1 or 2 over the course of a year, but they don't spend much time or energy on it. Well, what's the real value to the organization if you're not improving? So being able to speed along changes, prioritize security remediations side by side with those critical value creations that you're doing within IT to reduce risk. Improving detection accuracy. A lot of the tools that are out there, when you turn them on, it's a lot of noise. There was a pretty famous breach a couple of years ago where the security technology identified that the attackers were in there, but there was so much other noise that IT and IT security didn't do anything. It was a needle amongst the haystack. And that it's important to know, being able to improve detection, maybe even reduce tools to something that, that this is more meaningful for us. It's less dashboards to watch. It's less noise coming into our IT and IT security teams. Security technology, I think this will be interesting for a lot of people. There's a number of different security technologies to manage governance. One that we utilize for our customers is called Aptega. It is kind of the assessment engine that we use, but allows us to move from one framework to another. Some organizations may be required to be NIST 800-171 compliant because they do work with the Department of Defense. But there are new requirements now for CMMC. Well, do I need to go through a whole other assessment and review? Well, this product actually allows for easy migration. The dashboards, and this isn't meant to be a commercial, but the dashboards are great where management can see the growth over the course of a calendar year on the improvement of security and security controls within the organization. On the security defensive detective side of things, so these are more prevention detection. Firewalls and antivirus, I had mentioned earlier. Firewalls, everybody's got them. You've got them at home, you've got them at work, they're in networks all over the place. Some organizations will also have intrusion detection prevention technology sitting behind the firewalls. That firewalls are not magic. They block traffic or allow traffic, but they really, many of them can't look at that traffic and define, is this good or is this bad? And this is where IDS and IPS come in, being able to alert and potentially prevent these types of attacks that the firewall allowed. Certain types of next generation firewalls, Palo Alto, Fortinet, others, have combined some of these technologies where maybe you had 2, 3, 4 different pieces of network-based security technology, and now it's kind of squashed down to one security appliance with a lot of capabilities inside of it. Endpoint protection, detection, response. Antivirus is a dead technology, and if you're not running EDR or EPP technology, I would say you're likely in a lot of trouble. EDR and EPP are very powerful. They provide a lot of visibility, a lot of defense, a lot of capability. Content security, so antivirus is looking for certain characteristics of files, the size, the name, the header, the packer type, who it was signed by, characteristics. EDR and EPP technologies are really more focused around behavior. When you open that Word document, why does it reach out to a Russian web server? When you open an Excel document, why is it kicking off an encoded PowerShell script on your workstation? You open another Word document, and the first thing it does is talk to the local cryptography library. This smells like ransomware. So EPP and EDR are more focused on how attackers function, how they behave inside environments, even being able to identify lateral movement. Someone could have a good username and password in your environment, moving around from system to system. Antivirus isn't going to see that. Email filtering, web filtering, none of that is going to see that kind of thing. And this is really where the power of EPP and EDR come in. You, of course, need to have good backups, recovery, understanding if you're backing up to the cloud and you've got a small internet connection, how long is it going to take you to recover? If you've got to pull down 6 terabytes of data over a 200 meg internet link, it's going to be weeks. You've got to be able to understand these things. But backup and recovery are incredibly important. Are you doing disk to tape, disk to cloud? Do you have on-prem recoverability, or is everything cloud-based? And patch management, being able to kind of patch and maintain your operating systems and software throughout the course of their lives, again, foundational. These are all critical foundational pieces of security technology. Now we get into basics, and basics are a little more on the detection side. SIEM, Security Information Event Management Systems. This is where all of your systems, routers, switches, logs, and server logs, application logs, endpoint logs, all send in the kind of send to. So this is a repository of logs and activity and events that are going on your network and systems. In the event that it sees something odd or nefarious, like I'm seeing a lot of password failure logins from this one computer, there could potentially be an attacker on that system or some piece of malware trying to break into things. So the value is on monitoring and alerting for SIEM. Vulnerability management, again, kind of a step up. Patch management, you're throwing that net in the pond, you think you're doing a good job. How are you measuring it? And that's where having a vulnerability management software or a solution provider providing that function and reporting for you so that you understand, are we doing a good job in being able to measure it? Now, beyond basic, what are the more advanced technologies that we should look at? Well, identity and access management, Okta, SailPoint, Microsoft Identity Manager, Azure AD. How are you managing and trying to automate your access management? We have a termination. Does it take IT 3 days, 5 days to process? When we create new accounts, are they cookie cutter? How are we handling approvals for access to sensitive systems? All kind of key functions within identity and access management. More and more organizations, as they mature, are investing in this kind of technology, especially with the spread of cloud, where we've got our Active Directory usernames and passwords, and while we've tied that into Office 365, our Salesforce.com and Workday passwords are different. So I've got 3, 4, 5, 10s, different passwords for all of my enterprise applications. Being able to skinny these down to 1 or 2 is also a capability and goal and expected outcome of identity and access management. Data loss prevention. A lot of companies in management want to know, are people taking sensitive data out, or we have some obligation to understand if people are taking data out of our systems, or where it's going, or what's going on with data. At the end of the day, we're trying to protect data, not systems, not applications. It's all about data protection. And data loss prevention is a key element of that. In the enterprise space, So larger organizations, they're going to be hosting websites. So they're going to have a web application firewall trying to protect against SQL injection and some other basic attacks. They also may have a network access control. So if a guest comes onto their network, plugs into a conference room, that it's identified and kind of put in a guest network and not provided access to the general network where maybe they could access sensitive systems, or if that computer is compromised, it could taint the other systems inside those networks. Database monitoring, again, kind of who's watching the watcher, who is accessing this data, having monitoring around databases to protect access to the data is something that a lot of enterprises are investing in. Forensic capabilities and skills internally, and then kind of a building on from a SIM, security orchestration, automation, and response tooling. This really provides, hey, I see a bad thing. I'm going to send a command to the firewall to block this thing now. So this is kind of the automation of security analyst function within large enterprise. Endpoint detection and response. I had talked about the importance of this technology before. Rather than antivirus, it's doing a lot more than just kind of killing and quarantining. Some of the security technologies that are out there for EDR allow for rollback. They do a great job of identifying ransomware and other behaviors in the environment. Again, a lot of the things that attackers are doing today are well beyond the capabilities of antivirus. EPP or EDR from a technology, it needs to be able to support a lot of different operating systems so that you don't have 3 or 4 different types of point solutions. Geographic Support, is the company, very popular in a certain part of the world, but not in others? Is there a reason why? And if you're a global company, are you going to be getting support 24/7 by 365, kind of a follow the sun support, or are you going to be tied into a 8x5 Monday through Friday support model? The suite of products, while there are a variety, 20, 30 different EDR, EPP players in the market, many of them have some different capabilities, focuses. Maybe some of them have some data loss prevention capabilities, others do not. Some have managed firewall capabilities, others do not. Really looking at all the differentiators and how they stack up against each other. Managed services is, to me, kind of a critical function, and one that we play in. So antivirus is largely a set it and forget it technology. I install a server, I deploy it on workstations all over the place. I put that server in the corner. Every 4 hours, it's getting new signature updates. Every week, it gets a new engine update. It pushes those out. Things are good. My IT team, doesn't really deal with antivirus. It sees something, it squashes something, great. But it's largely ineffective to the point where the efficacy of AV is alleged to be between 6 and 10%. That's terrible. So EPP and EDR function more like a SIM. There may be some false positives. There's a lot more depth, breadth, complexity, and visibility and context in the solutions. So it is something that needs a little more time, energy, and focus on. And this is where having a managed partner to be able to monitor it 24/7 by 365, but also tune it similarly that you would a security information event management system. Some of these have third-party integration and other capabilities, but I would say those are on the periphery. The main functionality around core in the advanced response capabilities are important. With the distributed workforces that we all live with today, you may have someone in some other continent in a coffee shop with an attacker live on that system. How are you going to deal with that with antivirus? One, you're not going to see it. And two, if you had some telemetry that, hey, something's going on this person's computer, you send them an email, they get back to you the next day, the day after that you respond. It's 2-3 day cycle in order for something to happen. And all you want is a security technician, shut your system down. But it takes days and days to occur. Data loss, risk increase over time. being able to remotely access that system or contain it, network contain it over the internet is a very powerful response capability.
And Chris, as you said, the EDR EBP space is really a crowded space with a lot of different vendors out there. How does someone decide, kind of make that decision of, what product to lean towards, or where would you go for research?
Well, there is a lot of marketing fluff. There's a lot of stuff out there. Two things. If you have a Gartner membership, Gartner does a great job of, I think, breaking down, or Forrester, a great job of breaking down kind of who the market leaders are and why are they there? What are the capabilities, the pros and cons of them? Do they have a good product? Don't they? Are they, just a big company like Microsoft, playing in that space or not? Additionally, MITRE, M-I-T-R-E, performed an evaluation earlier this year of, I think, 14 different EDR companies. There are plenty of kind of security lab companies that have tested endpoint technology, but I think the security community as a whole have kind of tamped those down, don't really kind of believe the outcomes of those. They seem like they're more pay for play. But MITRE did a great job and ran each one of them through the same kind of attack from APT29. The results are all online, and you can see who really did well identifying the different tools, techniques, procedures, tactics of attackers, specifically APT29. So it was a very good evaluation. They don't give anybody grades, but they kind of tell everybody how each company did, 1 through 140 different TTPs.
Great, thank you.
So EPP EDR, how much time do you spend on each alert? How do you filter them down? What do you do on a Saturday at 11 p.m. when those occur? From a business perspective, these are all questions that you should be asking your team. A lot of IT teams are spread thin. Things that may happen on the weekends, well, I don't know, this thing looks like it can wait till Monday, or I'm just going to say that like I didn't see this thing. People don't necessarily want to take ownership. People in IT are working, nights and weekends quite often. And things like security alerts, well, it's usually a false positive. I'm not going to do anything. Well, EPP and EDR, more critical to have eyes on dashboard and be able to alert in a timely fashion. If an attacker gets in there on that first system, it's much easier to contain and remediate than 3 days later when they are all over your network and have broken all of your passwords and have access to all of your systems. So timeliness, mean time to remediation, critical for this. These are all questions that you should be asking yourself and determining from a risk perspective how important they are. From an EDR perspective, what are the things that you should be looking at? Monitoring and threat remediation and prioritization. So this might see a lot of things, but are they critical? Is the system sure it's an issue, or does it think it could be an issue? There may be a lot of events that are in the system, and how do you prioritize? What are the ones that I need to deal with right now? Does it give me the ability to triage and investigate? Who is patient zero? When did this occur? What was the timeline? Where else might be the attacker be? You need the ability to dig into and answer these business-related questions. How wide did this thing go? Whose passwords got stolen? IT needs data to be able to do that. And quite often they don't have logging turned on very well or enough to be able to do it. And that's where EDR comes in as a stopgap. Policy tuning, exception management. Every organization is a little bit different. Maybe you're a manufacturer and you create software. Maybe you're a healthcare organization and you've got some older equipment. Maybe you've got some old software that someone built for you. There's always exceptions to the rules inside EPP and EDR. It's important to have exception management built in. Reporting, am I getting good value? Again, the importance of measurement. Am I getting good value out of this product? Does it see things on a weekly basis? Is my team responding to them? Threat hunting is a little more advanced of a topic. When IT is not just playing defense and not just responding to alerts, but trying to be a little more proactive and getting into threat hunting. Hey, we heard about this thing attacking our types of industries. Do we see this anywhere in our environment? Maybe there's some new article in the Wall Street Journal about some new attack. Someone's going to send that down through IT. Well, they need the ability to threat hunt to be able to identify, is there a concern in our environment or not? Of course, I talked about the 24/7/365 and the importance of that. And additionally, in the event that something bad happens, what are the response capabilities from an EDR perspective? Can I pull back an image? Can I pull back files? Can I remotely access this device? Can I kill processes? What kind of triage and response and recovery can I do on a device anywhere in the world? All critical things that a good EDR should have. And we'll get into a little bit on protecting from the unknown. So antivirus, again, largely blind to ransomware. Some of them do an okay job, but ransomware is oftentimes polymorphic in delivery, meaning it changes system to system, kind of bypassing antivirus. Many attacks that we see right now are macros or script, kind of living off the land, using base functionality inside Windows or Mac operating systems that antivirus cannot identify, and also fileless attacks, being able to attack a system from within the memory space. It's not a file on a hard drive or on a file server somewhere that can be scanned by antivirus. Credential theft. If I have good credentials and I walk through the front door of your organization digitally, not figuratively, if I VPN in and start to move around your environment, antivirus isn't going to see me. It's going to see that, Steve from accounting is logged on to 15 different workstations. And those types of things. Response and rollback capabilities for ransomware. In the event that something bad happens, how fast can I get back to normal? And what does that mean? Do I need to recover from tape or backup? Or does my system have some kind of rollback capability in and of itself? Lightweight agents. Antivirus could often be very heavy and taxing. Maybe once a week you're running scans today and your system gets bogged down from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Wednesdays. EDR and EPP products are often lightweight, just kind of looking at behavior of things that are going on and don't need to scan things and really beat your system up from a performance perspective.
And so, Chris, this is really a truly proactive security tool.
It is, and in my opinion and estimation, I think it's the most important security technology that anyone could invest in. With that decentralized workforce, if you had a breakout today of ransomware in your environment, do you have enough IT technicians to send to everyone's homes to fix computers? How are you going to deal with that? The impact is going to be great. And we're seeing significant impacts to organizations who, we're okay. We've got firewalls, we've got antivirus, we're fine. Again, being essentially down and out for 8 days, that's a long time to be without revenue or be without, creating product for companies. Displacing your antivirus with something like this is incredibly necessary.
Thank you.
A little bit on the OT or IoT space. The healthcare organizations, manufacturing organizations, I talked earlier about kind of that lowest common denominator. Typically, healthcare organizations and manufacturers are going to have older systems on their shop floors or in different parts of their hospital or healthcare facilities. These devices might be running Windows NT, Windows XP. Maybe they haven't been patched in years. And from a lowest common denominator perspective, how are you dealing with that? You can't patch them. You likely have a unsegmented network, meaning that, from that shop floor, from those devices, that you can access any and all of your systems. If you had someone who accidentally visited the wrong website, plugged in a phone or USB drive, or someone downloaded something accidentally to that host. Maybe they answered email on it, personal email, or visited a social media site, clicked on something that they shouldn't have. This machine is now compromised. And you're likely not running security software on it because you don't want to upset such a fragile system. But now an attacker's got a foothold within your environment. Being able to protect these networks and these types of devices is important. And I would strongly suggest putting a strategy or asking your IT team and your operations team, your OT team, how are you handling risk in these areas? I talked earlier about that kind of divide between business and IT. There's also a fairly significant divide between IT and OT. We'll talk through a couple of attack examples. I want to kind of show, be able to talk through how an attack occurs, show you the value of defense in depth, and what some of the security technologies can do for you. So an attacker never begins an attack from their workstation laptop or their parents' basement. State-sponsored activity works the same way as does organized crime. They all have this infrastructure that they can kind of, once found, they can burn it down and create. So they are hidden behind an infrastructure or a wall. This could be a misconfigured email server or breached email account. That they are sending something through the internet to you. It goes through your firewall into your email filtering system. Your firewall has, if it's a next-gen firewall, it has IPS capabilities, maybe some sandboxing capabilities, also antivirus. If it gets through your next-generation firewall, it's going to then be filtered out by your email filtering or email security system, which also has an antivirus engine, some zero-day protection in there against phishing. You may also have it configured to limit certain file types, like we don't want to allow exe files or HTA files or other things that are known bad from the security community. From there, it passes through another next-gen firewall into your data center where your Exchange server lives. Your Exchange server email filter or email system also has some security technologies in it. File protection, again, going to limit some of the types of files that are coming into it. Also has its own malware and antivirus capabilities there as well. So it's kind of past, at this point, like 3 different layers of antivirus technology. And now, because your data center is really segmented from the rest of your, and again, this is kind of best of breed or best practice, is segmented securely from your workstation. So it passes through the firewall yet again to the Outlook client installed on your workstations. And what do you have from a defensive or detective perspective on those devices? Well, one, hopefully you're communicating and building a culture of responsibility and security, and you've done security awareness training. So your employee knows, well, this looks suspicious. I'm not going to click on it. I'm going to have someone review this just in case. But in the event that they do, there are firewall, host IPS, antivirus, privilege limitations. Do they have local administrator access on the device or not? If they don't, if they're just kind of a standard user, viruses have a much more difficult time trying to gain a foothold on that system. You also may have a secure configuration. You're going to be patching these. Maybe you have a Microsoft technology called App Locker or application whitelisting deployed on those devices. Memory protections, a number of different things on those devices to prevent bad things from going on. But say it bypasses all of those, and the person clicks on it, the attacker gains access to that system. That laptop calls out to a command and control server out on the internet, and that is how the attacker kind of corresponds or interacts with that device. All of those devices that you saw forward logs to a security information event management system that is trying to identify bad things that are going on. So it sees a lot of this activity and may alert saying, hey, we see this suspicious call out to the internet, going to a Russian IP address or wherever. From a controls perspective, outbound web filtering and egress filtering are important controls here. Web filtering is not just Big Brother, but should be looked at as a security control.
Chris, you mentioned some security awareness training there for users. We talked about phishing. How successful are phishing attacks in the United States today?
Phishing attacks are highly successful. I think the best companies out there who are best organizations that are out there that are doing phishing testing of their own employees may get around 4 to 6% are still clicking on things. And there is a caveat to that where if it's obvious, no one's going to click on it. If it's incredibly complex, maybe it's 10%. So, kind of a good middle of the road number for me is around that 4 to 6%. And that's kind of the gold standard for what I see. So, from a security perspective, getting it down from 20 to 25% all the way down to 4 or 5% cuts out the noise. Now I have a lot less from a security perspective, a lot less to respond to, but I still am hoping at that point that a lot of my layered detection and defenses are going to prevent these things. Maybe getting that number down to 1% or 0.5% of attacks are getting through that I need to be able to quickly identify and respond and recover to.
Thanks for that.
Another interesting attack, a lot of organizations are hosting or have some kind of either website or application that they're providing, maybe a supplier portal, a customer portal, company website, something digital that people from the internet can interact with. And again, an attacker is either going to attack it from maybe a botnet or maybe a breached system or what's often referred to as a jump box. This could be your grandmother's computer. This could be a student's computer anywhere in the world. It could also be a corporate computer inside a small, medium, large company. Could be anywhere in the world. But an attacker begins their attack through this device. And this is where, again, attribution is hard. When people are saying, it's the Russians, it's the North Koreans, that's more based on TTPs rather than the IP address that they're coming from, again, because they're hiding behind this infrastructure. So again, this attack begins to come in. It bypasses the firewall. The firewall says, oh yeah, I've got traffic coming in, going to this web server. I'll allow it. I don't see anything weird in here. The web server takes this, and antivirus is pretty ineffective when it comes to web server attacks. Secure configuration and limiting this web server to other systems is critical. So if the web server is breached, it's kind of contained in this secure little network and can't break into other things. But say the web server is broken into, and that web server has a database server inside the data center. And maybe from the web server, they gain access to the database server. Again, secure configuration, limited network access could prevent the spread further. But if you don't have that kind of internal firewall, if you don't have that secure configuration, moving from a database server to other servers in the environment is fairly trivial. Once there, maybe they gain access to your trademark data or your ERP system, and from there collect and stage a lot of data and exfiltrate it. Again, this is where web filtering and egress filtering come in. Why are my servers sending out large files? Why are my servers talking to Dropbox? So egress filtering and web filtering, again, critical controls that can prevent data exfiltration, but it's tough to do. And a lot of IT organizations are not finely tuning web filtering. It's more used to be Big Brother. I don't want you shopping during the day, or I'm going to monitor where you go, or we're only going to allow business activities, or you're not doing any kind of web filtering, in which case from the data center, they can go anywhere in the world unbeknownst to you. Again, all of these systems should be sending logs to a security information event management system that is correlating, reviewing, looking, comparing against threat intel lists, and identifying bad activity. Now the interesting part, how to stop an attack. I'm often asked, what is the security technology? Tell me what I need to buy. We talked about frameworks from a measurement perspective. Well, MITRE, the firm that I mentioned before that did the EDR analysis, MITRE, has also created a framework called ATT&CK. And ATT&CK is very helpful in understanding kind of the attack life cycle, how attackers are getting in, gaining access, getting persistence, how they're exploiting systems, getting a hold of data, exfiltrating, and monetizing data and access. So reconnaissance and weaponization. So I'm going to put this in a context that may be a little more familiar for you. So you have a house and you're trying to protect it. A burglar is probably going to drive through your neighborhood at some point and perform reconnaissance. Whose lights are on, whose aren't, whose cars are in driveways, who's got their garages open, what is going on. At that point, they'll go home and put together a plan and weaponize. Well, I see some, I saw some high-end cars, so, maybe I need certain types of tools to break into them. Maybe, I need some flashlights, this, that, the other. Maybe, I need some other tools to be able to break into windows, doors, whatever. So they weaponize. Then execution begins, and this is where delivery occurs. On the IT side of things, this is where you're going to get emails, you're going to get some attack delivered to you. Doing security is often doing the basics and doing them exceptionally. Patching and maintaining systems consistently, and doing the simple things, having good technology configured appropriately, configuring your operating system, patching, maintaining software and operating systems over the course of the life of the devices, incredibly valuable at turning away attack. From the exploit perspective, you get a weaponized email delivered to a number of people in your organization, or they are able to guess some poor passwords. Maybe you've got the standard length of 8 password, complexity turned on, and you're required to change them every 90 days. Well, someone in your organization is likely has a password of summer 2020 exclamation mark. You're likely to be using first initial last name as your user accounts. Maybe they can just walk through the front door of your organization. At that point, they're trying to gain control and persistence. I want domain or domain admin privileges. I want root access. I want the highest level of access so that I can move freely within your environment at will. At that point, I begin to execute my plan. What am I looking for? Certain types of data, certain types of elements. I'm trying to monetize. Some, healthcare provider, I'm going to steal PHI. If you're, a credit card taking organization, maybe you've got credit cards that I can steal and sell off. Maybe I can just sell access to your environment because you're a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000. If you're in the legal field, maybe you do a lot of M&A and that data is valuable to someone. So they begin to discover, move laterally, collect, and then stage and exfiltrate data. And then it's about maintaining access. They need to be able to get back in there, poke around. And once things are they've monetized what they can, maybe that's when they flip the switch and turn ransomware loose in your environment. And that's where that dwell time often happens. We will routinely go into ransomware events and see someone's been in here for 6 months. They've collected a lot of data, pulled out a lot of things, and then kind of, burn the bridge down behind them as they left, hoping to collect that last bit of money. A lot of people will often ask, well, are we doing best practices? And there's a lot of technical best practices in IT security, and I want to stay kind of at a level a little bit higher than that. So best practices from a NIST perspective, or planning, prevention, detection, response, and recovery perspective. Planning, do you know what you're trying to protect? What are the assets? What are the data elements? Do you have an application portfolio? how relevant are any or all of these to your business, so that you can further refine and define what you should be protecting and understand why. On the prevention side, play defense, play it well. This is configuration, this is patching. These are the IT operations that people don't like to do that aren't fun, but they are incredibly helpful. Do them well, do them exceptionally, and do them consistently throughout your organization. And you will find that it shuts down a lot of the noise. When you're growing as an organization, being able to detect is important. There's a lot of events going on. A lot of people are logging into systems. Data is getting pushed out or around all over the place. You cannot stick your head in the sand and wait for alarms to ring if you don't have a mechanism that will ring alarms. Monitoring for events, being able to investigate, understanding your ecosystem of what's normal is incredibly valuable. Responding, having a plan, working that plan, refining that plan over time, testing that plan to make sure that you are ready. So instead of that 8-day outage or 3-day outage, maybe it's 4 hours or 2 hours. And recovery. Don't get in a situation where you're relying on recovery and you didn't realize it, but you have a ton of data, it's all on the internet, and it is going to take you 2 weeks to recover it all. Understand worst case scenario from a recovery perspective. The business should be able to influence that. What is the recovery time objective, recovery point objective? Recovery time being, how much time is it going to be for us to recover our data? 1 day, 2 days, 8 hours? Do we know? And the recovery point objective, how much data are we going to lose? Do we only do backups weekly, daily, every 4 hours? In the event that we have to recover, how much data am I going to have to go back and reprocess? It's very, very important to know.
Well, Chris, those are some great goals and objectives and best practices for everybody to drive towards. Thank you for those.
And I think one of the most undervalued things here is not being too heavy in prevention and detection, not being too heavy in response or planning, but having a balance of all of these is really critical. And this is where consistency comes in. You could have a great plan, but if you're not playing defense, it's not going to go anywhere. You could play great defense, but if you're not detecting or responding to what's been prevented, is where you're going to fall down. It takes all of these in being able to have a program that deals with all aspects of this.
Chris, thanks for that. That was quite an education and some really, really great information. One question that I have here is as we finish up is, in your former role, what was your criteria as you went through that process to select a technology partner?
Yeah, I think, when it came to technology partners, I wanted somebody that was invested in my success, someone that wanted to share the burden of success with me, meaning that I didn't want a vendor or partner that I was just going to blindly trust, and they were going to have access to all my systems. And over time, I was just trusting that they were doing things. Was I getting relevant information from there? Quarterly business reports, updates on attacks? Were things too quiet or too noisy? In the event that I brought things up to them where, hey, what about this? Or, I know you're monitoring things, but we had a penetration test and you didn't identify it. What can we do to improve? That it is indeed a partnership, and it's not adversarial. Security, while it may seem simple, it can become incredibly complex. And having someone that you can partner with and kind of co-manage the risk and co-manage the technology is important.
That's great. Thank you. And to everybody, on the webinar today, I'll ask you to go ahead and submit your questions, and then we will get those answered for you offline. And I'll remind everybody that we've got the final 2 sessions coming up on November 19th and December 10th. Strongly encourage you to register for those as soon as you can. Chris, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate your insight. Thanks to everybody on the call, and wish everybody a great day, and we'll talk soon. Take care.